On the fringes of a quiet town, where the horizon runs wild and untamed, a reserved man maintains his land, his past etched in battle and heartbreak. Out of nowhere, a vicious motorcycle crew storms into the area, leaving threats and broken glass in their wake. Now, he must face the demons he thought were buried. With loyal canines, a few trusted companions, and instincts honed by hardship, he braces for a confrontation that will push his bravery and determination to their edge. The sun lowered behind Drywood, Texas, casting stretched shadows over golden fields stirred by the wind. It was the kind of place where time took its time, where farmers rose before light and slept with the dusk. Dust swirled along the gravel road leading to Monroe Ranch, a vast, 50-acre spread passed down through the Monroe bloodline. Elias Monroe stepped out onto the porch, his boots thudding against aged wooden planks. At 42, he carried the frame and grounded stride of a man forged by labor. His weathered, deep-toned skin bore the story of a life lived hard, marked by grief, conflict, and rebuilding. A thick, graying beard framed his strong jaw, and his eyes, keen and assessing, swept over the fields like a hawk scanning its territory. The ranch was a living mosaic of sweat and soil. At its center stood the main house, a time-worn two-story structure in fading blue, with a porch that groaned under familiar steps. The barn, a chipped red giant, stood behind it like a sentinel, housing tools, feed, and decades of memories. Off to the side, a metal shed stood plain and purposeful, doubling as both kennel and training ground, evidence that this was no ordinary farm. Elias was more than a landowner. Before Drywood, before settling the ranch, he was a military canine specialist, deployed in some of the world's harshest conflict zones. He trained dogs to sniff out explosives, hunt down enemies, and guard lives. His service brought both commendations and wounds. When his wife passed away, Elias traded war zones for open fields, longing for quiet days with his 15-year-old daughter, Maya. As the horizon burned orange, Elias let out a sharp whistle. Movement stirred near the shed as 8 powerful dogs surged forward in disciplined formation. The pack, 5 Belgian Malinois, lean and lightning fast, with ears perked and eyes razor-sharp, moved like shadows. They were built for agility, trained for precision, ideal for patrol and swift engagement. 2 towering Rottweilers followed, thick with muscle and menace, their mere presence enough to deter intruders. Stationed near the barn, they stood like silent sentinels, ever watchful of the perimeter. A single Labrador retriever, gentler in looks but unmatched in skill, trailed close, Maya's companion, skilled in locating both missing animals and people. Elias commanded the dogs with instinctive authority, blending verbal commands with crisp hand signals. A clenched fist sent them to positions. A finger snap triggered them to form a defensive arc around him. "Good," Elias murmured, kneeling to stroke the fur of Ranger, his lead Malinois. "Stay sharp." The dogs responded not just to orders, but to his very presence, finely tuned over years of combat-grade training. They weren't pets, they were protectors, soldiers shaped by discipline and loyalty, defenders of Monroe Ranch. Overlooking it all, from a loft window above the porch, Maya Monroe watched silently. Slender and wiry, with curls framing her face and intelligent brown eyes that mirrored her father's gaze, she absorbed every detail. Maya had her mother's kind spirit, but time had steeled her. Since her mother's death, she had taken on responsibility, feeding dogs, tending crops, assisting Elias with quiet strength. Yet her real brilliance lay elsewhere, in circuits and code. In a tucked-away loft corner, she created her own tech haven, a makeshift command post filled with scattered tools, tangled wires, and spare hardware. Her latest invention? A custom-built network of security cameras, crafted piece by piece from salvaged gear. Using salvaged cell phones and repurposed battery packs, Maya had rigged cameras across the fence lines and barns, turning the ranch into a fortress with eyes in all directions. "Dad's going overboard again," she muttered, fine-tuning the screen displaying multiple feeds. But deep down, she understood his caution. The world wasn't always kind to people like them. Her eyes flicked to a framed photo on her. Cluttered desk, Her parents on their wedding day. Her father in crisp uniform, his arm wrapped protectively around her mother's shoulders. "No one's taking this from us," Maya whispered. Outside, Elias was wrapping up his final checks when the low, menacing growl of motorcycles rumbled down the gravel drive. Instantly, the dogs went rigid, ears flicking toward the sound. Elias halted. He recognized that noise before headlights even pierced the dusk. The bloodhounds. 5 riders pulled up just beyond the front gate, engines snarling as they idled. Leading them was Jace Reaper Crowley, a wiry man in his 30s with tattoos creeping up his neck and a scar slicing across his cheek. "Evening, Monroe," Jace called, stepping off his bike. "Heard you're sitting on some hot property." Elias stood his ground, leaning on the gatepost, calm but unyielding. "This is private land." Jace gave a sly grin and kicked at the dirt. "Not for long. Word is, this land's about to change hands. My crew, the Bloodhounds, were willing to buy. Cash up front. No drama." "Not for sale," Elias replied coolly. The tension snapped. Jace's smirk faded. "That wasn't a request, Monroe." One biker hurled a glass bottle at the fence. It shattered, scattering shards across the dirt. Another revved his engine, flinging dust into the air. The dogs growled, muscles taut, ready. Elias stood firm. "Call them off." Jace barked. Elias didn't move. "They're not the ones you should worry about." The Malinois advanced a step, eyes locked, bodies coiled. Jace faltered, then masked it quickly. "This ain't done," he growled, jabbing a finger in Elias's direction. "You've got 1 week. After that, this place burns." The gang tore off in a storm of exhaust and chaos, leaving broken glass and silence in their wake. That night, Elias sat quietly on the porch, the Labrador resting at his feet. Maya joined him, her tablet aglow as she kept watch on the security feeds. "Do you think they'll come back?" she asked in a whisper. Elias nodded slowly. "They will." Maya didn't look up. "Then what do we do?" Elias grabbed the shotgun resting by the wall. "We make sure they never get the chance." The sky over Drywood blazed in hues of fiery orange and deep violet as the sun vanished behind the hills. The dust from the Bloodhounds' earlier visit still lingered, but Elias Monroe wasn't waiting for it to settle. From his porch, he watched shadows stretch long across the fields, his piercing gaze fixed on the horizon. Near the barn, the dogs paced restlessly, picking up the tension hanging in the air. Elias knew better than to face what was coming alone. He needed backup, people who'd stand firm when the fight broke loose. That meant calling on old debts, allies made through blood, sweat, and grit. He loaded the truck with crates of gear, tools, nails, and coils of barbed wire, then turned to Maya. "Stay inside. Lock up. Keep the cameras rolling. Don't open that door for anyone but me." Her voice was calm, but Elias caught a flicker of fear in her eyes before he slid behind the wheel. His first stop, Calvin Reed's Forge, a battered structure on the town's edge with sound of hammer on steel rang well into the night. Calvin, now 55, was a mountain of a man, brawny arms built from a lifetime of shaping metal. His long, graying beard draped down to his chest, and his welding goggles barely masked the spark of sharp thinking in his eyes. Elias found him hunched over an anvil, sparks flying as he molded a glowing horseshoe. Calvin looked up, setting the hammer down. "Figured you'd show up sooner or later," he said. Elias's face was hard. "They're coming back, Cal, and this time it's no bluff." Calvin wiped his hands on an old rag. "So, you finally ready to stop pretending you're just a farmer?" Elias locked eyes with him. "I need traps. Backup. Anything that'll make them think twice before stepping foot here." Calvin gave a low grunt. "Good. I've been itching for some action." He nodded toward the back corner of the forge where coils of razor wire, steel bear traps, and rows of spiked strips waited like sleeping serpents. "We'll make them pay for every inch." Next was Frank Ramirez, 2 miles south, guarding his ranch like an old-world sheriff. At 60, Frank's face was carved with the grit of age and sun, a hunter through and through. Despite the arthritis that tugged at his joints, He could still drop a coyote from 200 yards with his Winchester. Elias found him on his porch, cigar clenched between his teeth. "Heard about the bikers," Frank said without missing a beat. "Saw their tracks near your land." Elias nodded. "Think you can cover the fields?" Frank tapped the old rifle leaning beside the door. Been waiting for a reason to dust her off. The last stop, Jenny Mayfield's supply store, a cramped maze of farming tools, ropes, and weaponry. At 38, Jenny was sharp, efficient, and a deadeye with a bow. No one in Drywood had a cleaner kill record. Every arrow found its mark. She was sorting broadheads when Elias stepped inside. "Knew you'd show," she said without looking up. "What do you need?" "Explosives. Anything that keeps them out." Jenny tossed a roll of barbed wire onto the counter. "This town's been sleepwalking too long. Maybe it's time someone woke it up." By the time Elias returned to the ranch, his team was already there. Calvin was unloading iron stakes and sharpened rods. Frank moved silently through the fields, marking his lines of fire with the cold eye of a sniper. Jenny worked the fences, stringing wire and building traps with the rhythm of someone who'd done it 100 times. Pit traps were dug, shallow and deceptive, with spikes beneath layers of hay and dirt, meant to shred boots or tires. Tripwires were hidden in the grass, rigged to flare canisters that would ignite the night sky, exposing any trespasser. Some paths were seeded with small homemade explosives, meant to disorient and drive fear into anyone who got too close. Elias coordinated the patrols, assigning dogs to strategic zones. The Malinois took the front line, their ears twitching, their steps silent, their eyes watching. The Malinois took up positions by the yard and main gates, their speed perfect for cutting off intruders before they crossed the line. The Rottweilers guarded the barn and supply sheds like sentinels, massive and unshakable. The Labrador stayed close to Maya, trained to detect motion and alert the team through the live camera feeds. Maya had upgraded the surveillance system, linking the old Cellcam network to a weathered CB radio setup inside the house. From her loft perch, she had eyes on every inch of the ranch. "If anything moves," Elias told her, "you call it out. Don't wait, don't guess." As dusk gave way to night, Elias stood at the edge of the fields with Calvin, Frank, and Jenny. The wind carried a faint, oily scent of gasoline and leather, a warning. "You sure they'll come tonight?" Jenny asked, adjusting her bowstring. Elias's voice was calm, cold. "They're coming, and when they do, we won't be the ones running." One by one, the house lights blinked off, casting the ranch into darkness. Only the soft glow of the hidden flares rimmed the property, a quiet warning. The dogs settled into the landscape, their eyes glinting in the moonlight before vanishing into the brush. The moon hung low and full over Drywood, painting long shadows across the Monroe Ranch. The wind murmured through brittle grass, eerie and restless. In the distance, a low mechanical growl began to rise, the sound of engines breaking the silence. Closer, louder. The bloodhounds were coming, just as Elias predicted. Inside, Elias loaded the final shell into a shotgun. His hands were sure, but tension pulled at his jaw. Maya's voice crackled over the CB, urgent but controlled. Camera 3 has eyes. 7 bikes. 2 trucks. They're at the gate. Elias gave a quick nod and looked to his team. Calvin, Frank, Jenny, all in place, locked in, waiting. The calm before the clash. Outside, the bloodhounds arrived in a thundering convoy, engines snarling like caged monsters. Jace Reaper Crowley climbed down first, his leather jacket shining under the moon, his expression twisted with aggression. He raised a bat and slammed it against the front gate. "Elias!" he roared, his voice booming across the ranch. "This is your last chance. Open up, or we torch everything you love." His crew howled behind him, revving bikes, hammering weapons, daring a response. Silence. No movement. No lights. Jace's sneer twitched. He slammed the gate again. "I know you're in there, Monroe. Don't make us dig you out." Still nothing. The wind answered in whispers. A thick, tattooed biker spat at the dirt. Maybe the coward ran off. But Jace wasn't buying it. He sniffed the air, predator-like. "No," he growled. "He's here." He turned to his gang, barking orders. "Spread out. Search everything. Burn it all if you have to." The pack split up, boots pounding the ground as they fanned. Across the ranch, as the gang spread toward the barn, the house, and the backfields, chaos detonated. Boom. A flare exploded near the lead truck, flooding the scene in harsh red light. Sparks rained down like shrapnel, and a biker shrieked, flailing as his jacket caught the edge of the blast. "What the hell?" someone shouted, just as Calvin triggered another trap. Barbed wire whipped across the ground, snapping around two bikers' legs like snakes. They hit the dirt hard, thrashing and howling to break free. Then crack. Frank's rifle split the air. A truck tire burst with a violent pop, the vehicle lurching sideways, crippled. "Kill the lights," Jace bellowed, but before his crew could move, the yard lights vanished all at once. Darkness poured across the ranch. The only illumination came from the dim glow of flare embers, flickering like warning fire. The bloodhounds were now blind, and Elias knew it. From that dark void came the low, menacing growls of predators. Near the barn, a biker screamed as two Malinois streaked from the shadows, sinking their teeth deep into his arm and thigh. He collapsed, yelling, struggling under the weight of muscle and fury. At the fence, the Rottweilers emerged, massive, unmoving, their silhouettes glowing like beasts out of legend. The gang was cornered, snarls and snapping jaws closing in. Maya's voice crackled through the CB, calm but intense. "Two heading toward the north fence." Elias answered flatly, "Let 'em run. The rest are ours." But Jace wasn't fleeing. He charged the house, boot crashing through the front door with fury. Inside, Elias waited, shotgun raised. Jace's eyes blazed with hate. "Dogs and party tricks won't save you," he snarled, lunging with the blade. Elias deflected the first strike with the shotgun barrel, but the hit slammed him against the counter. The weapon fell. Jace saw his chance, grinning wide. "No more toys, old man." He swung again, but Elias wasn't finished. He grabbed a crowbar from the counter and swung with all he had, driving Jace back. Blood trickled from Elias's mouth, but he stayed on his feet, ducking the next slash. Jace roared and slammed his knee into Elias's ribs, sending him sprawling to the floor. Looming above him, Jace raised the knife for the kill. "Say goodbye." Elias, coughing, locked eyes with him, and then, against all odds, smiled. Jace stood frozen, his eyes racing around as Elias pulled on a rope hanging from the ceiling. With a sharp snap, the steel cage descended, crashing onto the ground and trapping Jace inside. He roared in fury, clawing at the bars, but it was futile. Elias wiped blood from his mouth, smirking. "Looks like the hunters become the hunted." Outside, the chaos was winding down. Calvin tackled the last biker, securing him with rope. Jenny shot another arrow, pinning a man's sleeve to the barn wall. Frank's rifle fired once more, and the gang scattered, their resolve finally crumbling. "Maya," her voice steady despite the adrenaline, called the sheriff. "We've got gang members at Monroe Ranch. Send everyone." By the time the police arrived, Elias and his team had neutralized the bloodhounds, tying them up and disarming them. The dogs stood guard, their eyes glowing in the moonlight, while officers cuffed the remaining bikers. As the last gang member was hauled away, Elias stood on the porch, surveying the battered but intact ranch. Maya joined him, leaning against him. "Are we safe now?" she asked. "For tonight," Elias replied, his hand resting on her shoulder. "But people like them never stay down for long." Maya met his gaze, resolve in her eyes. "Then we'll be ready." Elias smiled, proud of her. "Yeah, we will." The ranch had been scarred, but it had endured. The bloodhounds came for a fight, but left in chains. As the sun rose, Elias knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a new chapter. The first light of day cast a golden glow over the horizon. The first light of day bathed the battered Monroe Ranch, casting a golden glow over fields that had once been peaceful, but were now scarred with tire tracks, broken fences, and the remnants of last night's chaos. Smoke still curled from scorched grass near the driveway, and the lingering scent of gasoline filled the air. Elias Monroe stood on the edge of his porch, a cold compress pressed to his bruised ribs. His shirt was torn, stained with dirt and blood, but his eyes remained sharp and calculating as he watched the last of the bloodhounds being escorted away in police cruisers, their cuffs glinting in the early morning light. Maya appeared behind him, holding a cup of coffee. Her face was pale, but her hands were steady as she handed it to him. "They got them all, Dad," she said, her gaze following the convoy of officers. The sheriff said Jace is facing federal charges, drugs, weapons trafficking, and attempted arson. He's not getting out anytime soon. Elias took a sip of the coffee, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "They'll come back," he muttered. "Not these idiots, but someone else. Men like Jace, they're just symptoms. The real problem's still out there." Calvin Reed was the first to step out of his old truck, carrying a toolbox in one hand and a bag of nails in the other. "Figured you could use some help," he grunted. Frank Ramirez followed, his hunting rifle slung over his back, while Jenny Mayfield pulled up last, her truck bed stacked with lumber and fencing supplies. "What's the plan, boss?" she asked with a grin, trying to lighten the mood. Elias surveyed the group, men and women who had fought beside him, who had risked everything to protect each other. "We rebuild," he said firmly, "and we make sure this never happens again." The team set to work. Calvin reinforced the fences with steel posts and added razor wire along the perimeter. Frank used his sharpshooting skills to create elevated watch points, setting up vantage spots for anyone on guard duty. Jenny installed motion-sensitive lights along the fence and buried pressure sensors in the dirt paths leading to the house. Inside, Maya stayed busy, downloading surveillance footage to send to the police. She also cataloged every weapon and tool left behind by the bikers, from brass knuckles to Molotov cocktails, and sent a detailed report to the sheriff. By sunset, the Monroe Ranch was stronger than ever. With the property secure, Elias shifted his focus to the future. He knew one victory didn't mean the battle was over. To protect Drywood, they couldn't rely on him alone. The whole community needed to be ready. He started with the dogs. Over the next few weeks, Elias turned his training field into a community defense hub. He taught neighbors how to command and handle the dogs, using his Malinois and Rottweilers as models. Calvin helped by designing training dummies and obstacle courses, while Jenny held archery lessons. Maya, on the other hand, organized safety workshops for local kids, teaching them how to set traps, operate radios, and spot suspicious behavior. She even got the sheriff to sponsor self-defense classes, with Frank volunteering as the instructor. One afternoon, as Elias watched Maya demonstrate a slingshot technique to a group of teenagers, a wave of pride washed over him. She had faced danger head-on and come out stronger. "You're really good at this," he told her later that evening, as they sat on the porch. Maya smiled. "Guess I had a pretty good teacher." Weeks passed, and life gradually returned to a new normal. The fences stood strong, the dogs patrolled the fields, and the neighbors felt safer, knowing they had each other's backs. One evening, Elias found himself alone in the training yard. The dogs were restless, sensing his unease. As he cleaned his rifle, his mind wandered back to his military days. The missions, the losses, and the men he couldn't save. Jace's words echoed in his thoughts. "You can't stop what's coming." But Elias wasn't afraid. He had survived war zones, rebuilt his life from nothing, and defended his family against impossible odds. He wasn't about to let fear take over now. Maya approached, carrying a lantern. "Dad," she asked softly. Elias looked up and set the rifle aside. "Yeah, I've been thinking," she said cautiously. "Maybe it's time we stop waiting for the fight to come to us. Maybe we should go look for answers." Elias raised an eyebrow. "You mean leave the ranch?" "Not forever," she replied quickly. "Just long enough to figure out who sent that letter. To make sure this is really over." Elias thought about it for a moment before offering a faint smile. "Maybe you're right." The next morning, Elias checked the mail. Among the bills and advertisements was a single envelope with no return address. Inside was a note written in the same jagged handwriting as the first one. "You won this round, but you're not out of the game yet." Elias folded the letter and tucked it into his pocket. Maya appeared behind him. "Another one?" He nodded. "What do we do now?" she asked. Elias gazed out at the horizon, where the next chapter was about to begin. The rising sun bathed the fields in hues of gold and crimson as Elias reflected on the neighbors who had stood by his side, the traps hidden beneath the earth, and the dogs patrolling the fences. "We keep building," he said with resolve. "We make this place stronger. If they come back." He looked down at Maya, his voice calm but firm. "We'll be ready." Monroe Ranch became more than just a home. It was a fortress, a symbol of defiance against the chaos threatening to disrupt their lives. Elias and Maya stood together, stronger than ever, knowing they had faced the worst and emerged victorious. For now, the battle was over, but as the wind whispered across the fields and the dogs barked in the distance, Elias knew their fight was far from over. Whatever lay ahead, he and Maya were prepared.